Thank you to Noni and to Kim. That was beautiful. Beautiful music. There's power in music. And I find that there is also power in stories. Several years ago, there was an intriguing article about Easter in the Huffington Post religion section, how Easter and Passover can make your family happier. Well, we're all about happy families here at Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren. So I got the article out, I dusted it off, and it said that this is the season when tens of millions of people will do something so familiar that it's easy to forget just how radical it is. Two faith traditions, it says, will commemorate the worst moments from their past. For the Jews, it's Passover, in which they relive their 4 centuries of slavery in Egypt. And for us as Christians, it's Easter, part of which is the suffering and the death of Jesus. Of course, both of these stories have hope-filled endings. The Jews ultimately escape slavery and eventually make it to the Promised Land. And for us, the Easter story is one of resurrection and new life, as we have heard here already this morning. Still, it says, the larger question is worth considering. Why are these stories, maybe the darkest of days, at the very center of our faith stories? And their stunning answer to this question? These stories help us to be a people who can survive. And I would add that they help us to thrive and to be a people of resilience, of strength, and of hope. The author did a thorough research trying to figure out the secret for strength in families. He talked to cutting-edge scholars, innovative brain researchers, world leaders of business, sports, and religion, as well as countless everyday parents who struggle to find the time and the energy to ask the big questions in life. And he found that the children and adults who knew more about their family's history had higher self-esteem, a stronger sense that they had some control in their lives, and a deeper belief that their family functioned well. Those who knew the stories from their family's past consistently displayed emotional health and happiness and proved to be more resilient. And it wasn't just the fun and the happy stories, but also included failures, setbacks, and other painful times. You know, like the story of Uncle Dewey, a brilliant surgeon in his day and the life of the party. He was loved by all. Daily, he bravely struggled with bipolar disorder and got by, only with a lot of help from his friends and family. Then there was dear sweet Grammy Lillian, with a wicked sense of humor, who would crack up anyone with her accurate rendition of a camel chewing its cud. And great-grandpa Harry lost an arm in a farming accident at age 65 and continued to farm, including milking a whole herd of cows, even beyond his 80 years. And this is a true story. This is my great-grandpa. Legend has it that even in his last years, he climbed up on the roof of the old 3-story farmhouse to repair some shingles with just one arm and wearing a neck brace for broken vertebrae incurred in an auto accident. Telling our stories is important, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The important factor seems to lie in a person's sense of being part of a larger family. It is discovering that they are part of a larger narrative. They have a strong sense of intergenerational self. They know they belong to something bigger than themselves. And that's where religion comes in, according to the article. Meaning can be found in history. The sheer act of telling and retelling stories helps us to understand God's role in the world, as well as our own position in a long line of ancestors who were not so unlike us. When we tell the story, we are extending a line from our children and our children's children to their past. And our stories include not only the positive moments, but moments of hardship and pain, and the resiliency and hope that emerge in the face of those difficult times. Well, it has been a difficult couple of years. When we think back to those early weeks of the early pandemic, before we even knew to call it a pandemic, we were sure that we'd be back in our church building together the next Easter. We just didn't know at that point which Easter it was. It was 2 later. Sitting with uncertainty is one of the most difficult things that we have to do. Learning how to manage that uncertainty, that unknowing, is one of the best skills one can develop to foster mental wellness. There is a term emerging in psychology research called post-traumatic growth. It refers to the positive growth that comes after a period of psychological struggle and adversity. We have been through and are still in a time of struggle and adversity, and no one has escaped this one. We're going to look at that a little more closely in a couple of upcoming weeks. You know, churches have stories to tell. Just last week, when 4 of our youth were baptized, we heard again the baptismal stories of God's promises and God's love, and we connected with one another. And we connected with countless other sisters and brothers who had entered those waters before us. This morning, I'd like to revisit the Easter resurrection story, our story, and also the story of Mary and Peter as told in Mark. Early on that first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. They were on their way. There was no happily ever after promised to them. They didn't yet have the rest of the story. They had never heard of Easter. A risen Savior wasn't even on their radar. They had no foresight of the angelic beings or an empty tomb. This was no high, holy, and spiritual trip they were making. These sojourners, Mary and Peter, were compelled by hearts that ached with grief and separation. Alone, Mary had come to mourn a loss. She longed for a body to touch and to bid goodbye. She came out of a deep need to be where Jesus was. Perhaps she came partly to convince herself that it was really true. How unbelievably difficult to lose a person whose life had so dramatically impacted yours, who had shown you the grander meanings of things, and who has shown you your place at the center of it. It is hard to lose someone so cherished, an extraordinary man who woke you up from the pettiness of the everyday and led you beyond yourself. Someone who said, "You are not merely a convenience, you are the beloved." And Peter joined in some kind of a boyish foot race to Jesus' tomb after he had spent the past few days running in the other direction, away from Jesus. Maybe he was feeling so guilty that he could hardly wait to say that he was sorry. Sorry for denying Jesus after boasting about his loyalty. Sorry for not being present at the most important time. Sorry for not being there for Jesus just when the chips were down. Maybe he was jealous of the other disciple, the favorite, the faithful, beloved disciple. Maybe he harbored petty resentment for others who seemed to be so much more blessed by God, for those who were full of confidence and joy, not the gut-wrenching guilt and shame that Peter felt. Whatever thoughts, whatever feelings consumed their hearts and minds, Mary and Peter were on the way early that day, before even a beam of sun streaked the sky, separate sojourners at different places on the same road. They both knew that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus had taken the body of their beloved Rabboni and had placed him in a cave into a new tomb, as was the custom, and they had sealed it with a stone, a very big stone, which they knew stood in their way. There was no doubt that the stone would be a major hurdle. And maybe here is where we too can draw a line extending from Mary and Peter to us. We too are sojourners on the road, and we too know about stones. We have our own stones in our past. Every one of us has a stone story to share. The stone of pain and grief grips our heart. The stone of failure and loneliness fills our spirit. The stone of wayward children, of restless spouses, keeps us awake at night. The stone of drugs and alcohol imprisons our families and our communities. The stone of diminishing strength, illness, and aging limitations holds us in its grasp. The stone of racism and classism, sexism, and every other ism blocks our path at every turn. The stone of violence around us and around our world leaves us fearful. The stone of exclusion and separation saddens our hearts. But that is not the end of the journey for Mary and Peter, and it's not the end of our journey. When Mary arrived, she saw the stone had been rolled away, and when Peter heard the news and arrived, he too found that the stone was rolled away, and Jesus was not in the tomb. Neither was he gone. His mission was among the living, to whom he appeared in new and glorious form, not once, but 4 more times in the Gospel of John. Every time Jesus came to his friends, they became stronger, wiser, kinder, more daring, people of resilience, of strength, and of hope. Every time he came to them, they became more like him. And this morning, this Easter morning, we remember that the stone is now gone and Jesus is not in the tomb. But he is not gone. In new and glorious form, he is with us. Jesus' mission is among the living. And each time we encounter Jesus, just as Mary, he calls us by name. He is calling us to a new creation, an unimaginable future, which is only the beginning of an ongoing revelation of what resurrection and new life and its implications might mean. Every time we encounter Jesus, we too become stronger and wiser and kinder and more daring. We become more like him. And our early morning darkness gives way to light. Death and evil do not have the last word. Jesus is alive in new and glorious form, and each time we encounter him, we remember that we are part of a larger narrative, a narrative that is about peace and justice, mercy, reconciliation, enlightenment, transformation, service, and openness to all. And that together we can move mountains, banish fear, love our enemies, and change the world. So rise and shine, sisters and brothers. It is a new day, a new dawn. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed.